While a lot of the time cartoon drawings of our favorite superhero characters come straight from the mind of the creator, they also very often come from real-life sources. Whether it's a terrifying German Expressionist film, a bizarre scene from a soap opera, or the creator's own cousin who he totally had a crush on, superhero names and likenesses come from a plethora of sources. Batman's creator Bob Kane and collaborator Bill Finger chose names out of history to give the Caped Crusader a moniker that fit his personality. In Bob Kane's autobiography, Batman and Me, he says that Finger wanted a name that was associated with nobility and the landed gentry to symbolize his millionaire playboy status, so he went with Robert the Bruce, who you might remember from Braveheart. Hey! Bruce Springsteen, get out of here! Bruce's last name, Wayne, was picked by Kane. And before you hurt your brain, let me explain. He wanted a character from the American Revolution and cycled through Adams and Hancock before settling on Mad Anthony Wayne. I'm Batman, a brigadier general in the American Revolution. His nickname Mad came from how ferociously he fought the British, and it's actually a real connection in series lore. Mad Anthony Wayne is an ancestor of Bruce's in DC Comics. Insane! Speaking of Batman, his most iconic villain, the Joker, has his origins in a very creepy German Expressionist film, as if there are any that aren't creepy. 1928's The Man Who Laughs is based on a book by Victor Hugo, and it's about a boy who was disfigured by King James II after his dad refuses to kiss his hand. King James carves a permanent smile into the child's face, and he's forced to live with that smile his whole life. The villagers laugh at him, he falls in love with a blind woman who's the only one who can love him because her smile is so hideous, all very silent filmy. A 17-year-old Jerry Robinson used a playing card Joker as inspiration at first, but Finger and Kane refined it to look more like The Man Who Laughs. And the resemblance is uncanny. Crazy. If Victor Hugo hadn't written this book, and it hadn't been turned into a silent film, we might never get Heath Ledger's iconic Joker performance, and that would have been truly tragic. It's gone. Speaking of Heath Ledger's Joker, you have to see this video.
So would you welcome the curious and the very talented Tom Waits?
Let me get comfortable here.
I know why you choose to have your little group therapy sessions in broad daylight.
Occasionally, I'll do a cover version of somebody else's number.
You complete me.
They sound almost identical, with a bit of Joker whimsy added by Ledger. Unfortunately for all of us, Ledger died shortly after filming The Dark Knight of an accidental prescription drug overdose, and with his death, we'll never know if Ledger actually used this interview as inspiration. But the interview is from Ledger's home country, Australia, and it's so similar, I can't imagine he didn't see it. Holy multiple entries, Batman! Iconic superhero villain Catwoman was created by Bob Kane, who says that he based her appearance on movie star Jean Harlow, who, according to Kane, personified feminine pulchritude at its most sensuous. But that's not all. She was also partially based on Kane's cousin, Ruth Steele, who he totally had a crush on. Check out this clip while I look up what pulchritude means. Context clues, Dan. Context clues.
Bob Kane always loved me and said if I wasn't his cousin, he would have married me, although I never would have married him.
Ruth Steele burn.
He used me as a model for his cat lady. He loved the way I looked, and that's what he did.
She was his cousin by marriage, so it's not as bad as you thought. Catwoman was initially conceived of as the Cat, and her sole purpose was to add some spice into Batman's boring personal life. As they were on and off lovers, Batman would often let Catwoman go after he caught her, which arguably led to the character being stricken from the comics. In 1954, a ratings board of sorts called the Comics Code had many strict rules, including, if crime is depicted, it shall be as a sordid and unpleasant activity. Criminals shall not be presented so as to be rendered glamorous. In every instance, good shall triumph over evil, and the criminal punished for his misdeeds. The glamorized criminal Catwoman flew in the face of these guidelines and wasn't seen for 12 years until 1966, when she came meowing back. Interestingly, the crime rate in the US from 1960 to 1970 doubled. Maybe the Comics Code was a good idea after all. Oh, and pulchritude means beauty. So, can't just say beauty. Everyone's favorite X-Man, Wolverine, was actually created as a punching bag for the Incredible Hulk when he visited Canada. But lucky for us and Hugh Jackman's accountant, Wolverine took that small appearance and slashed his way up to becoming the most popular member of the X-Men. His look came from a very specific source that sounds weird at first, but then makes perfect sense. Marvel Comics lifted Wolverine's look from character actor Paul D'Amato in the hockey movie Slapshot. But when you think about it, Wolverine is Canadian, so it makes sense they'd go to a hockey movie. The sideburns, grizzled look, it's all there. The Nick Fury we know and love from the Marvel Cinematic Universe was actually one of two characters on this list who are both inspired by and played by the same actor. Can you guess the other one? Fury's appearance in Marvel Comics looked nothing at all like Samuel L. Jackson prior to 2002, as he was white and had hair. But in 2002, comic book writer Mark Millar used Sam Jackson as his inspiration. When asked if he minded, Jackson said, "F no, man. Thanks for the 9-picture deal." And we all lived happily ever after. J. Jonah Jameson is the editor of the Daily Bugle that we all love to hate. Always getting into Spider-Man's business, why can't he just leave him alone? Expertly played by J.K. Simmons, it's hard to imagine anyone else playing the role, but the original J. Jonah Jameson from the comics was inspired by none other than the Marvel man himself, Stan Lee. He told director Kevin Smith that he always wanted to play Jameson in the movies, but they wouldn't let him because he was too old. Of course, he didn't think so, but mini cameos in every Marvel movie and his bank account probably cushioned that blow. According to Lee, I thought if I were a grumpy, irritable man, which I am sometimes, how would I act? And that was it. So, you got me. Arguably the most powerful of all the X-Men, Professor X was initially modeled after Academy Award-winning actor Yul Brynner. Brynner was in such classics as The Ten Commandments, The Magnificent Seven, and most famously won an Oscar for his portrayal of the King in The King and I in 1956. Brynner more often than not featured a bald head, just like Professor X. Brynner was also an unusual person, probably more so than the Professor, as he hid most aspects of his personal life and outright lied about it to tease people. For instance, he claimed to be half Swiss, half Japanese, but he was really just Russian. Yul shaved his head for The King and I, and the bald look made shaved heads fashionable, and transformed him from just another actor to a veritable sex symbol. It was the 50s. Could you guess the other superhero character who was based on an actor who then played said character? If you guessed Harley Quinn, you're right!
Harley Quinn, nice to meet ya.
And your prize? Unnecessary electroshock therapy. Quinn was the brainchild of Batman the Animated Series creators Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. In 1992, she debuted as the Joker's crazed girlfriend.
I feel like a human being again.
And Dini actually modeled Quinn on his longtime friend Arlene Sorkin, who was a regular on Days of Our Lives. According to Sorkin, we did a dream sequence where I was a court jester, and he said that was the inspiration for Harley. And you have to see this dream sequence.
I'm on at the roll, let's get it. Boy, you're a rough crowd. You forced me to shoot at you the moon.
It was the 90s. Early 90s. Sorkin ended up voicing Quinn for Batman the Animated Series, among a bunch of other Batman properties. Tony Stark, the eccentric billionaire playboy who is as much of a maverick as he is smart, was originally based on Howard Hughes. According to Stan Lee, Hughes was one of the most colorful men at the time. He was an inventor, an adventurer, a ladies' man, and a nutcase. He was incredible. Tony's father is actually named Howard in the comics, after Howard Hughes. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man took billionaire inspiration from a different source. No, not Jeff Bezos. He's more like Professor X, without the sex appeal. No, our modern-day Tony Stark was modeled after none other than Elon Musk. It makes sense that the founder of Tesla would be the inspiration for the very high-tech Tony Stark of the MCU. According to Robert Downey Jr., Elon was someone Tony probably hung out with and partied with, or more likely they went on some weird jungle trek together to drink concoctions with the shamans. Sounds like Elon, all right. Actors, cousins, soap operas, and historical people, all teaming with inspiration for comic book writers and movie directors to add that extra depth to a character that really makes them impactful. And I apologize for the months of therapy you will most surely need now that you've seen both The Man Who Laughs and that weird-ass soap opera scene in one video. Please don't act out and carve a smile into a child's face. It never ends well.